On this episode of Marketing Mavericks, we get lessons from LeWeb, blurring the lines between content and advertising, and developing brand trust. Coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Marketing Mavericks is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com. Hi, this is Leo Laporte, and if you'd like to help us design our new website, I invite you to visit twit.to/navtest. We've got 8 quick questions we'd like to ask you that will help us make the navigation easier to use. That's twit.to/navtest. Thanks a lot.
This episode of Marketing Mavericks is brought to you by Freshbooks, the simple cloud accounting solution that helps millions of entrepreneurs and small business owners save time billing and get paid faster. Join over 5 million users running their business with ease. Try it free at freshbooks.com/mm. And by Audible. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/mm. And by Squarespace. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface, integrations with Getty Images and Google Apps, new templates, and an incredible feature called Cover Pages. Try the new Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter offer code MM at checkout to get 10% off. This is Marketing Mavericks, episode 34, recorded Thursday, December 11th, 2014. LeWeb and brand trust. Welcome to Marketing Mavericks, where we discuss everything at the intersection of marketing and technology here on Twit TV. It is pouring down rain on the outside, but we're all dry inside here at the studio. And we've got 2 really interesting guests that are going to join us. One of them from LeWeb in Paris, Esteban Contreras. Hello.
Oh, hello. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to Mavericks. You've been on many times, but I don't think you've ever been on from Paris.
Yeah, this is my first time streaming in from Paris.
And we have our first time guest, Faris Yakob. Is it Yakob?
Yeah, Yakob. I mean, I'm flexible. I don't mind, really.
It sounds better when you say it anyway. And yes. You're out of town as well, but you're here in the United States. You're actually is that Tennessee? Are you in Nashville?
I am. I'm currently in Nashville. I'm here for a bit of time for a client project and for the holidays.
And we have our technical director, which I am going to introduce again, remembering to do that, who is in charge of me during the show, and he's Anthony.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, hi, Anthony.
I didn't tell him I was going to do that. I like surprises. Anyway, so I just... what's that?
I said boo. It was a surprise.
Yeah, it didn't really.
Thanks.
Your hair is kind of, a surprise, though.
Surprising.
No. Surprising. Yeah. So if you're watching, you're missing out. If you're not watching, that's right. Oh, wow. How long is that?
That long, I guess.
I don't know. What
Longish.
Is it, like 4 feet? That's crazy.
It's not quite as long as me, and I'm slightly taller than 4 feet, but, maybe 2 or 2, I don't know, 2.
Okay, well, there we go. So, lots of interesting discussion this week happening at LeWeb, which I wish I could have attended. But I know I have a lot of friends there, including Esteban Contreras. So when did LeWeb start? Was it 2 days ago?
This time it started, I believe, Tuesday, so it's 3 days in a row. And it was a great event. I mean, if you're talking about years, I believe they started in like 2006. So they've been around for a while. It's a very established event here in Europe.
And what, just for those people who maybe have never heard of LeWeb, who, or maybe they have and they don't know what it is, what is LeWeb all about? What makes LeWeb special besides it's in Paris?
Yeah, I think LeWeb is interesting. It probably started after many of the Web 2.0 conferences that happened in the early 2000s, and as social media started to take over, and companies started talking about going digital, and so the web has sort of evolved as the different tech and especially internet trends have evolved over the years. They keep tracking them, and I think they bring some localization to what's happening in Europe. They also bring people from all over the world so that people get a global perspective.
Is this your first time at LeWeb?
This is my first time at LeWeb. I've been invited to go a few times, and for whatever reason, I wasn't able to come. So I was very excited to finally make it out here. I spoke on a panel, and I went to see a bunch of other fantastic speakers, and it's a very exciting environment. So it's really fun to be over here.
So what did you speak about when? So you said you were a speaker at LeWeb. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was on a panel, and I was able to talk a little bit about what we at Sprinkler we call experience management. So, social media has become basically as ubiquitous as ever, right? We're not fully there yet. Not everybody's on the internet. Not everybody's a social media user. But social media has become really a common thing that everybody is a part of. We're seeing how brands are responding to that. So at Sprinkler, we've built an infrastructure for what we like to call omnichannel experience management, so that brands can guide the experiences they have with consumers across all touch points. So whether it's a tweet, whether it's content that you see on an ad on Facebook, really any form of interaction with a brand, you want to make sure that as a brand, you want to make sure that that's a positive experience, and so that's something that's really important for us as Sprinkler. And so I was going to talk a little bit about how owned, earned, and paid media interact, and how Sprinkler is thinking about it as a long-term play. We don't see social media as a fad. It's not. It wasn't a fad. It's something that's going to be. It's going to continue to evolve. And so we talked a little bit about personalization and not making that a creepy thing or something that's not safe, but instead, personalization that's utilitarian, that adds value, and that's relevant, and gives provides good stories that people actually care about and want to hear from the brands that they're buying from or interacting with.
So I was saying this before the show. I've been to Paris once. Is this your first trip to Paris at all, Esteban?
I've been a couple of times for conferences and also to just enjoy Paris. So I think it's my fourth or fifth time. I love it, and I'm looking for a place to find a crepe, because I just crave crepes when I'm here, which is kind of stereotypical, but I love crepes.
Well, and Faris, now you're known as, I think, self-proclaimed I'm going to get this. I hope I get this right. The nomad, the homeless marketer. Is that right?
I don't think I went with homeless marketer necessarily. I guess what you're referring to is the fact that I don't have a fixed abode at the moment. For about 18 months, my partner and I have been traveling the world in between projects. So we are an itinerant consultancy. We lend advice and proximity to clients all over the world, and in between we look to recharge our creative batteries by looking around at interesting countries.
And you've actually done some of that remote work. You've been traveling to do that. You and I talked yesterday about a little bit of that. How important is it to be in a location where the client is located? I mean, because that's what you do. You kind of pick up and then you just plant yourself with the client and work there.
It's actually very variable. So in some engagements, we work like an agency. And if you think about how an ad agency engages with its brand clients, let's say, you probably see them once a week, maybe, sometimes even less frequently than that. A lot of the work is done remotely. So in some aspects, we do that. There are work engagements we do that are sort of longer retainer projects, where we work partially remotely, partially on site. And then when we're doing things like, obviously, public speaking and workshopping, then our presence is required for that, although not in this instance. In this instance, you can get me digitally across the Skypes.
So when did you start in the advertising and speaking space about this evolution of social media, which I know, Esteban, you're entrenched in, and that's part of what you do as well, and really focusing on that part of marketing. When did you start doing that, Faris?
I guess I started working as a digital type person in 2003, maybe. Before that, though, I was a management consultant. And in 1999, 2000, we were working on digital transformation for blue chip companies and investing in startups. But then there was a slight correction in the market, and that consultancy ceased to exist then. It was a tech strategy operation out of Cambridge. So about 10, 12 years now, something like that, I've been doing this kind of thing. And if anything, I've sort of moved myself out of digital. I was specifically digital for a long time. And I've tried to sort of, because I think strategy is holistic, I've been cognizant of not trying to get too narrow, digital, social, regardless. So I guess I spent a long time being a pure play digital player, and now I'm kind of, I guess, back to being a broader person again, maybe.
Well, and I think that makes sense, especially since this isn't necessarily a new type of conversation around what's happening on the web and how we're as marketers using it. It's actually changing back to a more traditional communication, which we had Jeremiah Aoyang on the show last week. I know he's at LeWeb right now. He was also one of the speakers. And I know part of the conversation at LeWeb is about how we're moving from the traditional business economy to a much stronger sharing type of platform, and how the industry is in general changing. I mean, there was a time where it made sense to have a big business who is using employees to go out and get conversation. Now it's a lot different game. And as marketers, we're trying to also make that transition, right? I mean, what have you found, Esteban, around this conversation at LeWeb of the evolution of the big corporation to a smaller, shareable economy?
Yeah, I think that the sharing economy was definitely a big topic here, and I think it's a big topic everywhere. Jeremiah did a good job of sharing the new version of his honeycomb, and he talked about how different industries are starting to adopt ideas that others have already started to do. And so we heard from people like Daniel Kraft talking about the Uberification of healthcare. Fred Wilson said that healthcare may be the biggest industry to look into the sharing economy next year. There was a lot of talk around what I like to call all things crowdfunding, even things like Bitcoin and crowdsourcing, and how all these things, if in many ways they are old, they date to the origins of the web. But until now, there's more of an infrastructure for these things to mature. And it's interesting because for large brands, I think they're convinced that social media is something that they have to do, and it's not going away. And now we're starting to see brands also appreciate things like what's happening with crowd and sharing economies and what that means for their industries.
Faris, you have spoken about this. I've actually watched some of you did a TED Talk, I think.
You did?
I did. I know. On this idea of how we communicate. What has changed just in the last year? I think really in the last year with onset of using more and more shareable technology. You know, Esteban mentioned healthcare, but across retail, transportation, we're seeing this evolution. What is your point of view on that?
I have a couple of thoughts, I guess. One, which is that the terminology of sharing is sleight of hand and very unhelpful, possibly. I think the first kind of socially motivated sharing companies like Neighbor Goods allowed you to actually share things. I don't think things like Uber are sharing even vaguely. They're simply a different way to utilize unutilized economic capital that's been previously deployed. We used to have an economy based around buying products and then not using them very much. Cars spend 90% of their time parked. Drills get used once, and so there's a lot of unutilized economic capacity in the economy. So what these companies, when they do well, what they're doing is making the system more efficient. They're providing a way to efficiently connect buyers and sellers. They're just marketplaces. They're not in any way sharing things, right? They're sort of collaborative consumption ideas. I do think, however, what Uber has done is provide a shorthand for a bunch of really complex ideas. People can say, oh, it's the Uber for dogs. It's the Uber for pet food. It's the Uber for healthcare. And I think that's become a kind of aspiration of, again, really rapid growth and possibly slightly untoward business practices. That's what I think.
Okay, well, I want to talk about how as marketers, though, we're changing, and we're used to marketing big brands and big business, and certainly we market small businesses as well, but that's a different way now that we are sharing information with social media sites and how we use our friends. But before we do that, I actually want to thank a sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is Freshbooks. This episode is brought to you by Freshbooks, the cloud accounting software designed from the ground up for entrepreneurs and small businesses. In fact, I wish that I knew about Freshbooks when I was starting out. I'm a marketer, not necessarily an accountant, and it could have saved me tons of headaches because you're trying to keep up with things, right? Well, if you get a fresh start in 2015 with Freshbooks, it's the easiest way to invoice clients, organize expenses, and track your time. Are you still using Word or Excel or maybe Google Docs to make invoices with FreshBooks? You create professional-looking invoices in minutes. FreshBooks is built for a growing business. On average, FreshBooks customers double their revenue in the first 24 months and get paid an average of 5 days faster. With FreshBooks award-winning mobile apps, you can do it all from anywhere on your Android or iOS devices. Avoid these awkward emails and phone calls to your late-paying clients. Automated late payment reminders help you get paid faster and stay worry-free. Do you keep your receipts in a shoebox? I think I do. Snap photos and receipts right from your phone to instantly capture expenses. It's so easy. Billing clients for your time has never been easier. In fact, just open the FreshBooks app on your phone, start the timer, and go. If you ever need help, you'll talk to a real person every time. FreshBooks award-winning support is ready, and support is free forever. CNET likes the refreshingly straightforward approach to FreshBooks. Try FreshBooks for free for 30 days, no obligation. Go to freshbooks.com/mm and enter Marketing Mavericks in the How did you hear about us section when you sign up? Start your 30-day free trial today. Go to freshbooks.com/mm and don't forget to enter Marketing Mavericks in the How did you hear about us section. We thank FreshBooks for their support of this episode of Marketing Mavericks. Make it easy on yourself, marketers. Use FreshBooks. It's so easy. Anyway, okay. We're talking about the sharing economy. We're talking about LeWeb and our guest Esteban and Faris. Thanks again for joining. So Faris, what do you specialize? You said you're trying to get away from some of the social aspect or the digital aspect of marketing, and you're getting more traditional. What does that mean?
It's not. I think the dichotomy of traditional and digital is unhelpful. I think what we do is set up oppositions in the industry among people who kind of, let's say, are younger or older or have different kinds of experiences. And I think the big challenge that marketers face is one of the fragmentation of strategy and the reintegration of disparate elements. So as a consultant, without any kind of ad factory to feed or social media factory to feed or whatever, we're trying to be as holistic as possible in our approach to strategy, because strategy is about business behavior and brands, and not about any specific subsection, not any specific tool or deployment, I guess.
What would you say about that, Esteban? You focus a lot, obviously, with your business, and it's definitely a part of everything we're talking about. But how important is social?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is that everything is converging with technology. So saying digital versus traditional in many ways, it's confusing and it creates a separation. I do think that in practice, you see people and teams that are dedicated to certain things that are more on the digital side than on the traditional side. And so that separation will continue until we see the full radical shift. But we're already seeing 40% of ad dollars shifting to digital. Some say 10% of budgets to social, at least in the U.S. So there's definitely a digital transformation that has taken 30 years or so for the back office, and for the front office, which is what Sprinkler focuses on. It's been in the last 10 years or so where it's really been radically transformed, and it's been transformed because people's lives are changing, and gradually we don't notice it. But really, if you look at how companies do businesses today versus 20 years ago, it's incredibly different.
Well, and a big part of that is the content creation, right? Now that we have advertisers. In fact, let's get back a little bit. I think it was in, I'm trying to remember the year it was. Maybe it was 2010 that I first had Scott Monty on my show, and we talked about Ford Motor when he was with Ford Motor, and they were spending at that point, which was pretty aggressive, 25% of their marketing budget on social. You say now 40% of that is happening in that space, and that's continuing to grow. But a big part of this trend is content creation. We talk about it all the time, where we encouraged the brands themselves to create content, and now we have advertisers creating content, and then we're over flooded with content. We have all types of content everywhere, and it's hitting us as consumers from all different directions. What say ye about that, Faris?
I think it's a very interesting question and moment, actually. I think it's interesting to me that the media industries are struggling under the business model that we provide them, which is advertising. And one of the responses advertising has to that is to start creating content, which is directly competing with our media partners. It's very confusing right now because it makes intuitive sense if, as we know they are, consumers are increasingly blocking out advertising using, for example, ad blockers, right? So let's look at digital advertising. Banners, a third of them are fraudulent, half of them are invisible or never seen, according to Google and the IAB, and a fifth of users use ad blocking software. So that part of the ecosystem is broken. In response to that, we create content which is less advertisee to try and engage brands with their prospects and customers, which makes intuitive sense. But we now swim, to your point, Tonya, in an infinite body of content. And there's just so much content out there that maybe the content isn't the only answer for filling these pipes we've created between people and products.
How are we filtering that content, Esteban? I mean, how are we as marketers using the distribution channels that we have to get content to consumers?
I think that context is really the key word here, and usually people like to associate the word context with the idea of the Internet of Things and wearables and stuff like that. But if you think about an organization providing something relevant and meaningful to a consumer, you're going to get back to the ideas coming from the 50s and 60s, this idea of giving somebody content or information that's at the right time and right place, right? This is not a new idea, but now with technology, it's actually possible. And so the fact that we often see a Facebook ad that's irrelevant or annoying or creepy is something that shouldn't be happening, because we have the technology to target, we have the technology to personalize, to know what device people are using and the context in which they are using that device. And so I think it's the fact that technology has entered the space of marketing and advertising has really changed things, because now marketing is a science and it's an art, and marketers have to know when to blend those in the right way so that they can be creative and innovative and unique, and at the same time leverage technology in a way that is respectful of the user and has empathy for the audience. And at the same time leverages what's happening and what.
So what does creating content mean? We use that term a lot, and I think people might think that it means one very specific thing, which is either a video or a picture or some sort of blog post or something like that. What does content mean, Faris?
I think if you want to make a distinction between content and advertising, content is something people choose to watch. Advertising is something you pay someone to watch. They occasionally overlap, but not usually.
I like that. That's actually very good. So, Esteban, what would you say about that? I mean, do you think that as marketers we overlap those too much?
Yeah, I think that was a really good definition. You can also look at it as owned, earned, and paid. And there's also the question of something that you read, something that you watch, something that's a moving picture or video. So that I do agree. Ultimately, advertising is something that you pay for. It's paid. Content is something that people ideally want to watch. Sometimes it's sponsored or native, and so there is a bit of a blurring of the line. But to me, if you're paying for it, that's advertising, and if you're not, then we can refer to it as content.
Who's doing a really good job of that, Faris? I mean, what brands are actually making it seamless? They're creating advertising, but that consumers choose to watch.
So, yeah, I think you get into that definition blurriness that I think Esteban was speaking to. The sort of canonical example of something which functions like advertising but is incredibly powerful content is the Red Bull Stratos project, simply because it was live streamed across. It was the second or third most watched live stream on YouTube. It was taken by cable stations all around the world. So it became a content piece. And I think you can see Red Bull's commitment to this. Red Bull's got a department now, a profit-making department called Red Bull Media House. They are, for all intents and purposes, an extreme sports production film company that happens to sell sports drinks to fund it and stuff. But so they've embraced media a very long time ago and became kind of very conscious about it. So they're probably the best example. But there's also, I think, small stuff. I think part of the challenge is that this area, this content, social advertising blurriness, is that really small companies can engage very small amounts of users and survive profitably in a way that I think it's very hard for massive companies to do, because a company the size of, let's say, I don't know, it doesn't matter, Chase or Nike or whatever, it's very difficult for them to engage with all their customers in a meaningful, individualized way without making it some sort of technology-mediated thing, like sort of personalized banners, which are inherently creepy and I don't think are the future.
Okay, so apparently this conversation around Red Bull actually works really well for me.
See, it works. Word of mouth marketing there. That was immediate word of mouth marketing.
That's immediate response. Thanks, Red Bull.
Exactly. Direct response, word of mouth. The RWOM. The RWOM.
It worked. So who's doing a really poor job of it? Come on, let's out the bad guys. Actually, the chat room wants to know that too. Who's actually not doing a good job and why?
It's a hard question to answer.
It's a hard question to answer when you want to have clients in the future, isn't it?
I know. It does put us on the spot. But
I would say that there's a lot of perfunctory content being generated, right? People became aware that these pipes are like non-stop pipes that people communicate at a very high cadence. And so there's a lot of stuff just being pushed out because there's a content calendar that requires it to be hitting a certain cadence, which is, I think being more considered would be probably helpful. Because to Esteban's point, timely relevance, it's kind of, there are very few moments really where I need timely information from brands. So it probably isn't about information per se. It's like, how do you compete with a link from BuzzFeed or any other piece of content ever created in the history of the world, like this show, for example?
Exactly.
And I have an example on. I won't give a specific example, but let's think of the fact of what I was saying earlier. We have marketing and technology converging, right? You have all this information. It's possible to have social CRM. It's possible to guide and manage experiences, and yet you still see these embarrassing moments where an airline will share not safe for work image that really should not have been shared, right? So I don't have to tell you the airline or the airlines, because multiple have done this kind of stuff. But I think that's the biggest thing, that if that's happening in public and we know about it, and the Matchballs and the BuzzFeeds of the world poke fun at it, that's just the top of the spear. But there's all kinds of irrelevant, untimely, unnecessary content that maybe a brand pushes because a certain team asks for it, or because they have to push 3 or 5 or 20 messages a day. I completely agree that the focus shouldn't be on pushing stuff. It should be on understanding a consumer and being there when the consumer needs it, and ideally targeting it based on an idea that the user actually wants to see something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, man. I mean, I do like the brands that have jumped in and said, look, we're going to commit to being a media entity, right? It's not easy being a media entity. Lots of medium people who've worked at, I used to work at a magazine years before I was a consultant, and it's hard to produce media at scale very rapidly on an ongoing basis, right? It's famously hard. So the companies that want to get involved in this as an ongoing channel of communication, they have to kind of really commit behind it. And if you don't want to do that, then maybe that's okay too. Maybe not everyone has to be pushing out content constantly, as long as you're responding to customers when you've got broken products. To me, one of the most important roles of social is solving customer problems in public, which functions like marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where we have overlap, right? So, you mentioned some, both of you got a little shy when we talked about actually outing the brands, but I'll say a couple. And I think part of that is, handling media, right? So you're talking about media and creating content through media outlets. What about brands like Uber, for example, who has been all over the press and still growing, but certainly is getting a lot of negative play. Would you say that they are handling their marketing and PR well, or would you say that they are not? And does it matter because we're still using Uber?
I think it does matter, and I actually think that Uber is doing a fantastic job. So this may just be me. Ultimately, here in Paris, everybody's using Uber. When I go to New York, everybody's using Uber. Ultimately, if you look at the accounts that they're, for example, if you talk to Uber on Twitter, they're incredibly responsive. They have the context of who you are. They're doing a good job of managing all of this, and the brand, I think, is intact from a marketing and PR perspective. Beyond this is a radical shift in how people move around in the city. And every time I talk to an Uber driver, they say amazing things about Uber. And I've never had a taxi driver ever say anything even close, even if they ever talk to me. They don't even talk to me, right? But in Uber, the drivers are doing most of the PR, and to me, that's the, like in retail, the person that gives you the product, that's Uber for me. So what happens in the headlines is it's actually helping Uber grow and get attention, and whether people agree or disagree with Uber's very aggressive approach is going to show in whether they use it or not. And quite honestly, we're using it.
So I'm slightly less. The reason everyone uses Uber, in my opinion, is because Uber is really good. The service works incredibly well. They scaled incredibly rapidly to a driving force, and they have billions of dollars of investment to allow that to happen. If they had a real competitor, like one that worked properly and wasn't, if there was a real competitor in the marketplace, I think it comes down to brand problems. So at the moment, does it matter? They got a new valuation of $40 billion. They're growing very fast. They provide a service which is clearly useful, particularly in America where there's no public transport. That's true. But one of the things we advise our clients, particularly clients of scale, clients that maybe aren't in their growth phase, or people forgive them for being a bit bro-grammery, is that values are quite important, that we think values matter. That we'd like to believe that people want to work with and do business with customers who have some sense of value. And if it's true that what Uber's been doing with journalists, what it's been doing with denial of service attacks on Lyft, what it's been doing, if it's generally been acting in a, if not childish, but genuinely aggressive and unpleasant way, then I think that does matter. Once there's a competition in place so you can make a choice.
I want to talk about a little bit more about that, as well as maybe some other advertising that's broken, including banner ads, which I know you recently wrote about, Faris, and how some of the old digital marketing is broken for good and what's going to change. But before we do that, I want to thank another sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is Audible. This episode of Marketing Mavericks is brought to you by Audible.com. To download a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/mm. Okay, Audible is a leading provider of audiobooks with more than 150,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature, including fiction, nonfiction, and periodicals. For listeners of Marketing Mavericks, Audible is offering a free audiobook to give you a chance to try out their service. One audiobook that you might want to consider downloading is the one that I just finished listening to early this morning, which is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. In fact, I wanted to make sure that I read the book, listened to the book before I actually saw the movie. And it was great because I had the book saved on my phone. I was able to listen to it on my iPad. And I just recently took a trip. And for those times where I really didn't want to talk to anybody or when a downtime, I was able to just listen to my audiobook. And the great thing is, which I did fall asleep on the plane a little bit, I was able to rewind and catch up where I left off. It's great. And it's super convenient. So to download this book or another for free, any one of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/mm. That's audiblepodcast.com/mm. And thank you, Audible, for your support of Marketing Mavericks. I really enjoyed the book, and I'm getting ready to start a new one with Audible. It was actually a guest that was on my show. I'm reading his book. So, in fact, as far as books go, Faris, you have a book that's coming out as well. You can actually start the pre-order. Isn't that right?
I do. I'm excited. Yeah, I've got a book coming out April 2015. It's on Amazon at the moment. I don't know if there's going to be an Audible version. I'd be very happy to record an Audible version in my accent just for you, Tonya. I'll record an audio version just of me talking directly to you through your ears.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a book. It's about advertising and content and media and all these things we've been talking about and how they're changing and exciting. And it's called Paid Attention, about how people previously have bought a lot of attention and how people maybe weren't paying attention. You see, it's kind of a joke, kind of. There it is. That's it. That's what it looks like.
That's it. He's so excited.
I am quite excited. I'm pleased to see that Amazon has decided to already discount heavily the book cover price. That's excellent news. Thanks, Amazon. Very good, very good. It presents clearly a very good value at that discounted price, which you should now pre-order immediately and then let me know what you think.
Yes, and just in time, they would make great holiday presents, right? Whether it's Christmas or, Kwanzaa, whatever.
Anybody you know who works in around advertising, content, or media, this will genuinely be something they'll be talking to you about for years to come. I'm very excited.
Putting them in my digital stocking stuffers, that's for sure.
You should. You must.
Only if you do the Audible version. I want you to say it.
I would like to. I'm thinking more and more about it. I want to do it in different voices, though. Partially, I'd like to do one as the voice of Bane from Batman. I don't know why. I just want to do that.
Esteban, he's encouraging, and Anthony won't ever let me do this show in voices. I always want to.
That would be great. We could also do... Yes, we could do that. I agree. Let's do that.
Anthony says no. So, Esteban...
I will come back to a pure voice version with you. Sorry, go on.
Actually, Anthony's a big Batman fan. What if we did the show in Batman voice, Anthony?
Yes, Anthony.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yes.
He'll allow it. You heard it right here. Yay.
You have to do the Batman voice, though, Tonya.
I will wear a mask.
Can you do the Batman voice, Tonya?
No. Show me. How does it go? How does it go, Anthony?
I'm not doing that.
You just brought it up.
No, I said you have to do it.
No,
okay.
You do it. You do it. Okay. So, all right. So we talked about maybe, and I said Uber might not be doing a great job, right? Because they're getting a lot of bad press. I think the chat room talked a little bit about Sony, who it's like crazy, the stuff that we're hearing about what's happened with their hack. And I think, businesses are...
Piss off North Korea. It's a bad idea to piss off North Korea.
Good to know.
No, it definitely is. They have nukes.
They have nukes. What do you think, Esteban? I mean, as a marketer, how do we prepare for this kind of stuff, being hacked and the press? I mean, we never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to have a plan at all times, because we're living in a world where everything happens second by second, and one day Uber is on top of the world, the next day you have a blogger hating on you, and it changes every day, so there is a promote and protect approach that every brand should have. I think let's talk about, for example, Airbnb. Airbnb had a lot of people criticizing them in their first or second year, in which they started to get famous, right? Because these guys had worked for several years before they became sort of infamous for what they were trying to do. And if you look at Airbnb's story, they originally just wanted to do the air bread and breakfast thing, but there were a lot of crises and a lot of moments that were very full of pressure, and people were criticizing them. But if you look at them today and the brand they are today, they're hiring people from Coca-Cola. They have amazing storytelling videos.
That's Jonathan. He's great.
Yeah, Jonathan does a great job. They have an amazing team. They just had a conference for Airbnb users, and those Airbnb users are passionate.
So
it has a bit of a cult-like following even.
Yeah, I think, Esteban, you raise a very good point that companies, particularly disruptive companies, tend to go through growing pains. And I think you're right that when Airbnb first started rolling its model out, there were some problems. And the problems were basically rectified through the enforcement of trust and through massive insurance, basically. So the issue Uber and Airbnb both face is one of trust. They are trust brokers. They enable you to invite somebody into your car or into your home, and they equally allow you to go into someone's home and to go into someone's car with some trust. And that's really important to your point about developing it. I think where they perhaps differed is how they address these things. So I think it's really important they establish and maintain these levels of trust. I think partially for Uber, they're seeing in India right now that some of their screening processes aren't as rigorous as they need to be to maintain trust with people, particularly women at night getting picked up by a fleet of drivers. So that kind of thing's important. But I also think Airbnb have always been kind of groovy in their approaches, where it feels like some of the stuff Uber was doing was less groovy, less growing pains, and more kind of douchey business practice, which I think they need to probably. I think the issue is not really one about, social media. I think when somebody knows something online, everybody will know that something. And so if you behave in a way you aren't proud of, don't do that anymore.
I would say in general, also a good idea.
Yes, in general, not just because of social media. Just don't be a dick to people. That'd be great.
There you go. I'm a huge fan of Jonathan, and I actually Milden Hall. I just totally just flubbed his name a little bit there, but I interviewed him when he was at Coca-Cola, and his entire outlook on marketing in general and connecting with the customer was a huge win for Airbnb. That was a really smart move of them to hire him. They were successful prior to hiring him, but now they're doing some really interesting marketing.
They're trying to go global. The rollout is complicated, and even though they've got more hotel rooms than any hotel brand you can mention, I think Jonathan was part of Coke's big shift towards content, which at the time was a very strong announcement 5 years ago. Everyone's doing it now, but at the time it was quite a big deal. And I think you're right. I think one of the things that Airbnb has done, I don't know if you've seen it online, they hired a Pixar animator to build their customer journey for them. So they have a Pixar animated customer journey to try and reinforce how important it is across the different stages of their relationship with customers to keep everything in mind. And I think that kind of thinking is really strong.
And they're definitely playing on emotion. They're connecting, they're showing how people want to be connected. And they, again, doing a fantastic job. And Jonathan is a really special guy.
We were digging through some old stuff, and I saw a Nokia box. And it said Nokia connecting people. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was good, wasn't it?
Have you used Airbnb? I mean, we're talking about it being a huge success. I have friends that have used it. You've used it?
So I both used it as a host and as a person to go and stay. Yeah. So when I was using it as a host in New York, eventually I was shut down by my landlords. Don't tell them I told you.
No one knows.
But it was great because I was trying to overcome the trust issue. I was trying to go, how do I invite people I don't know into my home? And not just the insurance of objects, but also the pain in the ass and the trust of having people like that. So one of the ways we dealt with this problem was trying to understand how trust is brokered. And I think Facebook and LinkedIn provide really good trust brokering systems now, because I may not trust you, Tonya, although obviously I do. But if I didn't trust you, if I was friends with you on Facebook, which I am, I can see all your friends. And if I see friends with you on LinkedIn, I can see who you work for. And so with those two things in place, I'm happy to invite you into my home. If you break stuff, I can get you fired. So it's kind of, how does trust... I think trust increasingly is a networked idea, that your identity is a networked idea in a sort of digital world.
Do you think that's a millennial movement? I mean, do you think that there's a generation of trust agents, people who are trusting other people with, transportation? I do have an issue with letting people into my home.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the 60s were groovy. I heard good things about the 60s. And I think that every generation of young people isn't cynical to begin with, right? And I think that's the right thing for young people to be. Young people, that's why they're so valuable to the industry, to everybody. They're not cynical. They are usually quite nice to each other. They do want to trust people. It's only as you get older and richer and kind of, more conservative that you tend to be less trustworthy. I think, though, to be a robust business, you've got to balance across different audiences and needs, right? I'd be interested to see the user profile of an Uber user right now. I don't think they're going to be, I think they're going to be younger, they're going to be wealthier, they're going to be smartphone friendly. They're early adopter audiences at this point.
I think you said as they get older and more wealthy, they become untrustworthy. I don't know if you really meant that or not.
Not untrustworthy. I think as they become less trusting.
There you go.
Yeah, less trusting.
I think that's life experience, right? I mean, what would you say about that, Esteban?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at magazines like Time and Life, and they would all talk about every young generation as if it was something amazing that was happening, with young people being rebellious and young people being lazy. And it's like, no, young people are young people, and they were the same in the 1500s, and they're going to be the same in the 2500s. It's I think old people are just angry that they're not young enough compared to younger people.
Exactly.
That may be the real problem, maybe once you grow older, you start noticing things that you used to do that you didn't notice. At the same time, I do think that technology has changed things in that now we are more aware of our surroundings, and we can tap into how people are communicating and what they're saying. And like you were saying earlier, I see my Facebook friends and I can see reviews. So some people become more trusting because they also understand the environment in which they're operating in. But young people will often make mistakes regardless of the generation or the technology available.
I agree with somebody in our chat room saying that age is a state of mind. In fact, Anthony, our technical director, often tells me I'm a third grader. So I don't know what that means.
Timothy Leary once said, "You're only as young as the last time you changed your mind."
Oh.
I'm fond of that one.
I am too. That's pretty good. All right. So if trust is an issue, how as marketers do we gain trust? And how is that factored into, we certainly create fun advertising. I think Airbnb has done a pretty good job of connecting. I think I loved their, they've come out with several, but the one with the, I think it was the Berlin Wall. Is that right? That,
yeah. That's really good.
That was kind of emotional. Like you really felt like, I could take this chance. I could let somebody, stay in my home. And I think they do a good job of pulling the emotion out and bringing in trust. What are some other, opportunities that our brands are taking advantage of when it comes to incorporating trust into their marketing play?
So, thing about trust, okay, is that it's very easily to give it once, and it's really hard to get it back. And I think the big issue that brands have historically faced with trust is that advertising presents the best possible face of a company and the best possible face of a product. And that's often not what you experience, let's say. So when you've got a company saying, we love our customers and we take care about you, and then you try and rebook a flight or change your contract on a mobile company, it's when there's a massive dissonance between the claims of affection and loyalty that you hear in advertising are not manifest in the experience of the product that trust is broken. So I think the best way to build trust is to not promise things you can't deliver and to not lie to people.
And I think customer service is a big play of that. We see, businesses, especially big brands, have definite silos where you have, and certainly that was the case in the past. We're getting better, but you have, the customer care silo, you have the marketing silo, the public relations, right, Faris?
So I think customer service is marketing if done in social spaces. I think it's funny in some ways that companies who only exist to serve customers have a department called customer service. That department actually is problem resolution most of the time. It's like something went wrong with the thing you promised to deliver in some fashion. Please fix it for me. And I think, ever since the United Guitar guy, people started to realize that an individual you can ignore when they're being pushed through a call center, but it's much harder to ignore them when they're tweeting or on YouTube. And so I think customer service is the most important thing customers do, and is often, to your point, left to a silo, outsourced to another country with people who are being remunerated based on call volume and an inability to solve problems. So I think, yes, it's a huge area. And I think the silo collapse that we're hoping for It's where people understand that customer service is a form of marketing and understand the investment profile holistically between those two things.
Losing trust is probably the hardest thing externally, right? If you lose trust with the customer, that's what can really, really affect you. Internally, it's definitely the silos. And it's actually the reason why Sprinklr started, because when social media started to pop up, you had a customer care team using something, a marketing team using a different tool, using different metrics, using a different approach, using a different strategy. And you had often dozens or hundreds of people that weren't collaborating and didn't know what each other was doing. And that creates a lack of trust when you have all these people communicating with an audience or with a customer and they're completely fragmented. It creates a lack of trust. And so Sprinklr was created with this idea that organizations needed an infrastructure so that you could understand each person as a person and that the brand would be able to act as a single brand.
I want to drill down a little bit more on this conversation of trust and customer care, because we've talked a lot about that on the show. But before we do, I want to thank another sponsor of Marketing Mavericks, which is Squarespace. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface that makes it even easier to create your own professional website or online portfolio. Squarespace 7 has introduced and makes getting started your unique web presence easier. It has a completely redesigned interface, now simpler to navigate and to operate in one seamless experience. Squarespace 7 allows you to live edit on one screen. No more toggling between Site Manager to preview mode. You can even preview designs in the device mode, so you see how the site will look on tablets and mobile. It's got instant access to professional stock photography from Getty. Squarespace allows you direct purchases inside the platform from Getty Images at just $10 for your site. Instant branded email setup with Google Apps. Now you can have branded email for your small businesses automatically set up when you sign up for a Squarespace account. It's incredibly easy to use, but if you want some help, here we're talking, Squarespace has a live chat and email support 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Plus, there are self-help articles and video workshops. So if you're not really wanting to talk to anybody, but you need some help, it's a great place to go. You can browse at your leisure. And it's inexpensive. It's so affordable. It starts at just $8 a month and includes a free domain name if you sign up for a year. And Squarespace takes care of the hosting so you don't have to. Start a free 2-week trial with no credit card at all required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure to use the offer code MM to get 10% off and to show your support of Marketing Mavericks. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. We thank Squarespace for their support of Marketing Mavericks. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere. That sounds like an adventure. And you know what? It's hard to believe that there are people that are out there that still don't have a website or some really strong web presence, including mobile, which is really important. And not everybody needs to necessarily have a mobile site, but some people still do it really poorly. Why is it, we talked about customer service, and customer service handling that online can be pretty critical. In fact, I think especially when you're talking about e-commerce and somebody's, toggling the idea of actually, taking that cart to the purchase line. How, as marketers, are we getting people to actually take the plunge and make the purchase? I mean, is customer service a part of that? I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about customer service, like, two things come to mind, right? There's issue resolution, fixing people's problems, and then there's customer satisfaction, making sure people are happy and content, right? Sometimes people call customer service when there really isn't a problem. But you want to make sure that they're satisfied, that they're happy, that they keep coming back. And so anybody that interacts with a consumer is in some way or another doing those two things, issue resolution and customer satisfaction. And if you think of marketing traditionally, and I would say for the rest of time, it comes down to four things, which are the classic 4 Ps of the product, the price, the place or distribution, and the promotion. And so all these things are blending when you start interacting more and more with consumers. And it's an interesting evolution. You know, I worked at Samsung for a few years. I worked in leading some of the social efforts that happened there. And Samsung had no idea how to interact with consumers up until, let's say, 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit more than that, because up until that point, Samsung talked to the telcos, the telecom companies, and the retailers. And all of a sudden, they had to have a website, and they had to have email, and they had to have social interactions. And now there was that direct, now the cheesy thing that everybody says, the two-way dialogue and all that stuff. But it really affects a large organization when all of a sudden you have to do that, and you have to satisfy your consumers directly. It's a big shift.
Yeah, I think you're right. Most brands don't have customers in the sense of individual users. They have retailers or telecoms companies that buy vast quantities of products. So they have 4 or 5 business customers, and then they sell on. So you're right. I think social media presents the possibility of a semi-permeable membrane between companies and their customers. And because it exists, people assume that you should be able to provide it, even if you never have historically had that function. I think I don't think you should have mobile websites. I think websites should all work on mobile. Otherwise, increasingly, there's not a lot of point in having them. And I think if you want to buy stuff, you should make it easier to do so. Increasingly, I think Amazon and Apple lead the way here. It's like if buying stuff was easy, people would do it more. Buying stuff is slightly complicated at all, ever. People won't buy it. And so on that thought, I used Apple Pay this week for the first time in Whole Foods, buying some very expensive organically grown groceries, I imagine. And it was very exciting because the first time you use a new piece of technology, it feels a bit like time travel. Before you've got a chance to get bored of it and habituate it, I got my phone out and I put my thumb on it and I paid for groceries. And that was quite exciting. And that, I think, is good.
It's like the future, right?
Exactly. It's like a tiny glimpse of the future. Yeah, which is nice.
Well, so as marketers, how are we going to try to intercept that space to maybe upsell? I mean, think about it. When you go to the store, they always have like a bunch of things like at the checkout. It's always the upsell, right? Bump up the basket by one more item.
Right. Yes, exactly.
How are we going to do that now with the future of payments?
So I think payments are really interesting because people promise a couple of things. Seamlessness is one thing they promise, right? We know how I've worked with credit card brands before. We know that the further away from money something looks like, the more likely you are to use it. So credit cards are used more than cash because when you've got a credit card, it feels like fake money. And I think Apple Pay will even more seamlessly create that kind of like, oh, it's just a thumbprint. I have no idea. I think where it probably will show a great deal of value outside of retail environments will be once Apple Pay thumbprint, when you can use that for e-commerce transactions via your mobile application or mobile website or whatever, then I think something huge will begin to happen. Then drunk people will be buying all kinds of stuff with their thumbprints from the mobile web. And I think that'll be a very interesting time to watch.
That's going to be a really scary time and interesting. And I can't wait to have you both come back and maybe talk further about commerce, especially cryptocurrency.
Protect your thumbs. It's important. They increasingly will be your credit card. Yeah. You need those thumbs.
Thumbs up, Facebook.
Exactly. Thumbs up.
I really appreciate both of you coming on. Esteban, you from Paris at LeWeb, and you as well, Faris, on your nomadic journey that you're going through there. So, but we have run out of time, so we'll have to have you both back sometime and talk further on this topic. So, Esteban, if somebody wants to connect with you, if they want to check out what you're doing, follow your work, how should they do that?
Yeah, well, they can follow me on Twitter at Social Nerdia. Social Nerdia, and pretty much anywhere else on the internet. I'm also at Social Nerdia, and if anybody wants to learn more about Sprinkler and what we do, we are the most complete social media management technology for the enterprise. So big brands use us to manage social media. You just go to sprinkler.com, and that's SPRINKLR.com.
And Faris, maybe they want to buy your book. Maybe they want to follow you.
It's great. They can follow me at Faris. I am at Faris on Twitter, which is probably the easiest place to find me. If you'd like to see what my company does, me and my partner Rosie have a company called Genius Steals, which believes that ideas are new combinations, and we can unlock the creativity and excellent thinking from around the world and deploy it for your business. Geniussteals.co is where all the cool kids are. .com is totally over, yo.
It's where all the cool kids are. Well, I want to be there.
.co is where it's at. That's right.
And thank you so much for joining. I can't wait to have you come back.
Thanks. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Now you heard him. He said he was going to record his book on audio so I can listen to it. But we'll see. And if you want to connect with me, you can certainly do that. You can follow me on Twitter at Tonya Hall Radio. I love to tweet. Or you can find me on Facebook. I connect and share conversations. And you can even email me, old school, at mavericks@twit.tv. I do read your emails, and I get really good suggestions. Even the really long emails, I read those too. So, or you can follow Anthony here at Twit TV. And we love having all of our great guests. This has been a lot of fun. Next week is our last live episode, and then we have a best of happening the week after that. Love to get your feedback on what you want to hear for next year. I'm already planning those shows, everybody. Thanks again for tuning into Marketing Mavericks. Until next week, talk to you soon.